Starting off this hour, a landmark ruling could pave the way for more regulations of the National Security Agency. U.S. District Court Judge Richard Leon ruled that the NSA's spy program violates the Fourth Amendment prohibition on unreasonable searches and seizures. The decision says, quote, the court concludes that plaintiffs have standing to challenge the constitutionality of the government's bulk collection and the querying of phone record metadata, that they have demonstrated a substantial likelihood of success on the merits of their Fourth Amendment claim, and that they will suffer irreparable harm absent preliminary injunctive relief. The ruling applies to the metadata collected from phone calls that take place from or within the U.S. Judge Leon also said that the Department of Justice failed to demonstrate how collecting this metadata actually helps thwart terror plots. Senior White House reporter for Politico Josh Gernstein was one of the reporters who broke the story, and he joins me now to discuss it. Josh, first of all, let's start off with how important is this ruling?
Well, it's not the last word by any stretch of the imagination on this program, but it is the first ruling to suggest that the program might be unconstitutional or to indicate that it may go against the Fourth Amendment. It's also really the first substantive ruling we've gotten on the several lawsuits that were filed after Edward Snowden leaked that information in June that made public the fact that this National Security Agency metadata program was going on.
Now, the decision that the metadata collected is likely unconstitutional, that's what the judge calls it anyway. What does that actually mean, and what does this ruling realistically do?
Well, the reason he says it's likely unconstitutional is this is a preliminary ruling. It's a ruling at the early stages of this lawsuit. There has not been full litigation back and forth to develop a record that would show the details of how the program works and what its impact may have been, what specific information was collected about these individuals who sued. So the judge had to make a decision at the outset of this lawsuit about whether he would allow this information to continue to be collected. And he found that as a legal matter, it appeared to violate the Fourth Amendment and that it shouldn't be allowed to continue. His decision doesn't have any immediate effect in the sense that he did stay it so that an appeal will go forward. But if his decision is upheld on appeal, he ordered that these individuals who sued, that the NSA not collect their information anymore and that any information they have on them be deleted.
And I'm glad you brought up the plaintiffs in this case. Can you explain in a little bit more detail what their claim was and what they gave as standing to constitute this lawsuit?
Well, you know, in the past, these kinds of lawsuits have failed because the courts and ultimately the Supreme Court concluded that it was too speculative, that the individuals who were suing couldn't really show that there was a high likelihood that their communications had been tracked or intercepted. That's why the Supreme Court threw out a case like this a couple of years ago. But in the wake of the Snowden disclosures, there are now documents, public records, and declassified information about how this program works that indicate that virtually every American is affected by it, in that if they use a telephone at any point to receive a call or make a call, it's very likely some information about that call is being retained by the government for 5 years. So the judge essentially found that the scene here, the background has basically changed, and that individuals who sue over this now do have standing to pursue their suits.
And just moments ago, journalist Glenn Greenwald, who actually helped Edward Snowden release those documents, submitted and released a statement by Edward Snowden himself about this ruling. I want to read part of it. It says, I acted on my belief that the NSA's mass surveillance programs would not withstand a constitutional challenge and that the American people deserved a chance to see these issues determined by open courts. Today, a secret program authorized by a secret court was, when exposed by the light of day, found to violate Americans' rights. It's the first of many. So obviously you have one side of the coin there, but I want to talk about the other side of the coin. Have you heard from any officials, kind of an official response to this?
Well, we haven't gotten much in the way of an official response besides the fact that they're studying the ruling, but it should be pointed out that while this judge thinks the program is probably unconstitutional, perhaps 15 or so other judges over the course of the last 7 years have repeatedly reauthorized this program and found that it doesn't run afoul of the Constitution. And a number of these lawsuits are now pending in different courts around the country. Other judges will get a chance to rule on this. And the issue is even coming up in criminal cases now, with the Justice Department telling individual criminal defendants that some aspect of these NSA programs played a role in their case. They then bring a challenge in the context of their criminal case. All those challenges and all those rulings eventually having the possibility of making it to the Supreme Court for a definitive decision on this program.
Now, while all of this is coming out, a top NSA official in charge of assessing the damage in the wake of the Edward Snowden revelations said that he would consider granting amnesty to the former contractor in exchange for the rest of the documents that he stole from the NSA. The man's name is Rick Leggett, and I want to read a quote from him. He said, "My personal view is yes, it's worth having a conversation about. I would need assurances that the remainder of the data could be secured, and my bar for those assurances would be very high. It would be more than just an assertion on his part." So what are your thoughts on Edward Snowden receiving any type of amnesty? Is it possible at this point, or is it a possible ploy to get him back into the U.S.?
I think it's possible, but it's extremely unlikely. Number one, you have the problem Mr. Leggett just referred to. How could Snowden show or prove that there was no way that these documents could get out? As we understand, he's shared a lot of them with various journalists in different parts of the world. There's really no way to provide an assurance that they might not release other documents that haven't made their way into the public domain. Another big hurdle here is there's a longstanding Justice Department policy in the United States that says that the department doesn't negotiate with fugitives about anything other than the terms of their surrender. So the idea that his lawyers would somehow work out, let's say, a plea deal or amnesty in exchange for his eventual return would require a pretty significant departure from the standard operating practice of the Justice Department. It's frankly something that I think probably the president himself would have to authorize in order for the system to allow it to happen.
Josh, there's just so many different elements coming out from the NSA these days. I mean, a presidential task force just drafted recommendations for it. Unfortunately, I mean, we could spend the whole show talking about it. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Political reporter Josh Gersey, thank you so much for bringing us your story.
Thank you.